For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lynn McClatchick. I am a transportation planner and engineer with HDR, and I'm based out of Calgary. I've got experience in a variety of transportation planning projects, including long-range transportation planning and good movement studies, corridor studies, TIAs, parking and loading studies, and active transportation planning. Today, I'll be presenting our recently completed Okanagan Gateway Transportation Study that we did in the city of Kelowna. So first, an introduction to the project. The study was a joint-led long-term planning study, and it was for an area known as the Gateway, which is at the north end of Kelowna, within the red circle here. The study partners were the BC Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, the City of Kelowna, Kelowna International Airport, and the University of British Columbia. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Kelowna, the City of Kelowna kind of stretches like this along the valley and along Highway 97, which runs east-west through downtown Kelowna here and transitions to go north-south through the study area. And then you have Okanagan Lake on the left. So the purpose of this study was to identify and define the existing and future transportation problems within the Gateway and come up with a network improvement strategy to remedy those existing and future problems. And so in developing our study, there were a number of data gaps where we needed to fill, and included in those were travel trends beyond existing intersection traffic counts and link traffic counts. We were also interested in Modeshare data for the area and active transportation data. And we were interested in understanding what travel generally was like within the Gateway. There was a perception that there was a high rate of internal trips within the Gateway, just because some of the major regional destinations, such as the university and airport, and we were interested in exploring those and validating those through our study. And that's where Streetlight came in. Our team knew about it and were interested in trying it out with this project. It was the first time that we used it. And so we worked with the Streetlight team and our own project team and the City of Kelowna and other stakeholders to come up with a 10-zone study area. So the zones are origin destinations, and we have them shown here. They're essentially made of conglomerated traffic zones from the regional transportation model. And you'll see two different types. There's bigger zone blobs, and those are areas. And there's also screen line zones that capture all trips that cross the screen line. And so this was our basic zone structure. You'll see we have 6 zones up here in the Gateway area. And then we had 4 zones outside of the Gateway area, which were essentially external zones from our study area. Zooming in, here are the 6 zones that we assigned within the Gateway. Quail Ridge and University South were residential areas on the west side of the study area. Here's UBCO in orange. Here's the airport terminal and parking zone, and then some surrounding airport industrial areas on the other side of Highway 97. So when we started the project, we developed an outline of how we were going to use the data in the interface. And we decided that there were 2 primary different purposes that we had for the Streetlight data. One was the origin destination data and matrices, which we used to understand the current travel trends in the Gateway and also to calibrate the travel demand model that we were using for the project. For this project, we used the regional travel demand model and a subset of it, and we used the data from Streetlight to calibrate that. But we also used the Streetlight platform and the information on there, including the visuals and the graphics, to get a good understanding of what trips were like in the Gateway without having to crunch many numbers. And that includes data like trip length data, which was readily available and easily understood. So here's a screenshot of what the Streetlight interface looked like online. This is a sample for 6 zones within the Gateway, so effectively internal trips within the Gateway. You can see the heat map on the right shows which locations have the highest number of trip ends. There's also a chart on the left that shows percentages, and there's a number of pie charts on the bottom that show more detailed information, such as traffic trip duration, so how long trips take, categorized into 10-minute bins. Then there's trip lengths, trip speeds, and trip circuity. We were also able to easily expand that into the 10 zones that we had selected and got the same results, or same, I guess, indicators, but with different results, obviously. And what this interface allowed us to do was easily compare internal trips versus all trips to the gateway, which is represented by our 6-zone analysis up here and 10-zone analysis down here. Now you can, you might not be able to read the numbers from here, but I can explain them. So this is the 10-minute bin of total trip duration, and this is the 10 to 20-minute bin. So what we're easily able to see here is that, the majority of internal trips within the gateway are less than 20 minutes. Whereas if you look within all of Kelowna, trip lengths are longer, trip distances are longer, and trip speeds are also higher. So the interface enabled us to easily understand this and get a sense of what travel was like within the gateway compared to overall trips in the city of Kelowna. So here's a summary of some of the key findings that we found through investigating the data on the Streetlight interface. One was that 5% of captured trips within the 10 zones that we analyzed had a trip end within the gateway. So, that's 1 in 20 trips in the city of Kelowna begin or end within the gateway. 25% of all trips with an end in the gateway were internal. That means that 75% of trips to and from the gateway were external trips. Nearly half of all trips to the gateway were less than 8 kilometers long or 20 minutes. Now, those of you who are active transportation and transit planners know that those values are definitely within the range where those trips could be accommodated by cycling and transit. We also found out that the airport made up 7% of all trip ends within the gateway, but only 3% of internal trips. So this identified that the airport wasn't, in fact, a major destination within the gateway for internal trips, but it was more important from a regional context, which isn't necessarily surprising because there's only one major airport in the region. So it makes sense that the majority of trips come from outside of the gateway to the airport. And finally, UBCO Okanagan constituted nearly half of the trip ends in the gateway at 47%. So we knew that that was going to be an important consideration in our study moving forward. The other part of our study, in addition to analyzing traffic and travel trends, was identifying existing and future problems. And this is a really high-level summary of what we identified. One was highway access to the Kelowna International Airport. There's only 2 accesses to the airport, one here and one up here, and really only one major one at Airport Way. It currently experiences congestion and queuing issues, and those are just going to be exacerbated in the future as traffic grows without improvements. Another one of the problem areas that we identified was access to UBCO. There's a number of vehicle access points, but their capacities are limited, and we flagged that as a future issue. And then also down here, Sexsmith Road is the southern boundary of the study area, and in the past it's experienced high collision rates and congestion. The ministry did make some improvements along Highway 97 recently, but it was uncertain in our study how much those had changed, so we flagged that as a problem area. And then the last problem area that we identified, or overall problem area, was internal gateway travel. As you can see here, the number of road connections and active transportation connections are somewhat sparse, and that's due to the geography and the physical characteristics. So in some cases, there's not roads and active transportation connections linking all of the major locations, and that can lead to the circuitous trips that we observed from the Streetlight Index. So considering the travel trends and these identified problems, this led us towards what we called a TDM first approach. So instead of simply modeling the future characteristics and then addressing them with traffic capacity improvements, our approach instead was to try to change future vehicle trips to active transportation and transit trips, knowing though that that's a typically more cost-effective method. And we used Streetlight to help us progress with that approach. So one of the analyses that we did using the Streetlight data was what I've termed the low-hanging fruit analysis. What you see left here is 2 trip ends, so an origin and destination. And then the second column is the percentage of trips out of all trips that were captured in Streetlight for a typical weekday. And then the approximate distance of that trip. And then using a factor of these two multiplying together, we were able to get what we've called the mode shift potential. And what this essentially identifies is just areas that are close together with a high amount of trips. So using this, we were able to identify, I guess, the areas that would have the best bang for our buck in terms of improving active transportation and transit connections and getting the highest amount of mode shift within the gateway as a result. Some of the findings from this analysis were that UBCO was listed as one of the trip ends for 4 out of the top 10 low-hanging trips. And the airport was only listed once, and that was the airport industrial park. So this really helped us focus our efforts on identifying where we needed the most improvements in the gateway. So from that approach, we ended up recommending a number of TDM improvements that included recommending increases to transit service to the airport. There is transit service today, but it's not very frequent. We also recommended significantly increasing transit service to UBCO, and that's to accommodate future growth that's projected at the university. But at the same time, the university is not projecting that they'll increase their parking supply very much, and so transit will really have to make up the difference there. We also recommended active transportation connections between UBCO. Right now, there's an informal pathway here connecting this residential area of Quail Ridge and the university. We recommended formalizing that and improving it. And then we also recommended a shuttle in the gateway to connect some of the major destinations, a number of other minor pedestrian gap fixes where there's currently no sidewalks or pathway. And then we recommended that the university and the airport and other businesses consider employee incentives, such as end-of-trip facilities, programs, things like that, to increase the attractiveness of active transportation and transit. So with our proposed TDM strategy, we were able to confidently predict what we believe are reasonable auto mode shares in the future. In this table, you'll see what we believe is the existing mode share in the gateway broken down by area, what we believe the future mode shift in the gateway will be without a TDM strategy, and what we believe is a realistic future mode share with the TDM strategy implemented. You'll see here for UBCO and University and South Quail Ridge, we believe that we can get actually quite a significant mode shift away from auto travel towards transit and active transportation by increasing transit and active transportation connections. Whereas at the airport industrial area and airport terminal, it's still a significant shift. It's almost doubling the non-auto mode shift, but just to a lesser extent, realizing where the trips are coming and going from. Here's that same data shown another way. Today there's 78% auto mode share in the gateway. In the future baseline scenario, we predict that would go down to 72. And with our mode shift strategy, we predict that would go down to 64 with transit, walking, and cycling increasing respectively. And finally, here is the same information shown a different way. And this shows the absolute number of trips for both existing and future horizons, and then the future horizon with our mode shift strategy. So you can see here on the right that auto trips will definitely still be increasing even with the TDM mode shift scenario, just to a lesser extent, with transit, cycling, and walking making up the difference, mostly transit. And this difference here between the business as usual future and the future with our TDM strategy really enables us to postpone some vehicle improvements to later dates and also to reduce the extent of vehicle improvements, ultimately likely saving money for the project and the city and the province in the end. So following from that, here is the slide that shows our final project recommendations. So we recommended that the final recommendations be implemented in 4 different phases. Phase 1 being short-term and phase 4 being long-term. The initial phases focus on access management along the highway, and then the next phases focus on increasing network connections. One of the flagship improvements of this project is this green connection right here. It is currently a northbound left turn off-ramp off the highway that provides access to UBCO. However, the ramp and bridge is about 8 or 9 meters wide, definitely wide enough to accommodate two-way travel, although it's just a one-way bridge right now. And so what we propose to do is add a second eastbound lane on that bridge, which will enable two-way travel. And then to add this road here that's long been contemplated, called the Rutland Connection. And what this does is this provides a second major access to the airport from the south, also providing a second connection from the airport to Sexsmith Road here, reducing some traffic volumes on the highway, reducing congestion at this intersection, and effectively providing, I guess, a south-facing somewhat interchange down here, delaying the need for a full interchange at Airport Way in Highway 97, and delaying, even the parts of the interchange that will be required, so that we can phase in the interchange, providing, benefits in the short term, in terms of improved access and operations at this intersection, without actually improving it. So that's kind of a summary of our main physical traffic improvement recommendations. And then, of course, with the TDM strategy, another one of our main recommendations was increasing transit service to UBCO, the airport, and the addition of a gateway shuttle. So moving back to Streetlight then, what Streetlight enabled us to do on this project was cost effectively collect origin destination data, which had a number of other complementary metrics, like Peter was mentioning, such as trip distances, demographic information. And we were able to do that, quickly, efficiently, and in a much more cost-effective manner than something like an older data collection method, such as license plate surveys. Streetlight's easy-to-use interface also enabled us to identify low-hanging trips quite early on in the study, which helped direct the study, and we weren't waiting for data. We were able to, to move ahead with certain parts of the study quite easily and quickly. And finally, the Streetlight interface makes it very easy, once you have your zones uploaded, to change the date and time of the data that you're looking at. So you can kind of explore different options and travel trends based on what you find as you go with the data.